I grew up in a small southern town, the kind where everybody knows everybody else's business, or at least they think they do. My mama always said, "Keep your head high, baby girl. Folks will judge you before you even open your mouth." I never understood the weight of those words until the day of Mr. Whitmore's will reading. Mr. Whitmore was one of the wealthiest men in our town, old money, old name, and I was just a caretaker's daughter, showing up in my Sunday best, heart pounding against my ribs like a drum. When I walked into that stately room, full of polished wood and sharper eyes, I could feel it. That shift, that cold, crawling judgment from people who wore pearls like armor, especially from her, Mrs. Palmer, the president of the HOA and the self-declared queen of social order. She whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. How? Quaint. Someone must have left the servant's door open. My hands trembled around my purse strap, but Mama's voice echoed in my head, steady and sure. So I lifted my chin, forced my shaking knees to hold me up, and found a seat near the back. I didn't belong there, or so they thought, but sitting there in that grand old house, with the air thick with smugness and entitlement, I had no idea just how much everything was about to change. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. I have a feeling you'll want to stick around for this one. The lawyer cleared his throat, a sound that cut through the stiff silence like a knife. He flipped through a thick packet of papers, glancing up the room full of expectant, impatient faces. Mrs. Palmer sat up straighter, lips pursed so tight they turned white. She already looked ready to snatch whatever scraps she thought she deserved. I sat still, hands folded in my lap, heart hammering harder with every second that passed. Mr. Whitmore had been good to me, kind in the quiet ways that mattered, but I never imagined I'd be sitting in the same room as his family, waiting to hear my name spoken aloud. To my devoted neighbor and friend, Mrs. Barbara Palmer, the lawyer began, reading from the will, "I leave the commemorative clock from my study." Mrs. Palmer's face twitched. It was almost funny if the air hadn't been so heavy. A clock? All that scheming for a clock? A few polite claps rustled through the room before the lawyer continued. To my beloved housekeeper's daughter, Miss Delilah Mayfield. Every head in the room turned, fast. I froze. He was talking about me. I leave the remainder of my estate, including the house, land, and all financial assets therein. The room went dead silent, then exploded all at once. I barely heard the gasps, the angry mutters, the scrape of chairs as people twisted to glare. I just sat there, stunned, while Mrs. Palmer made a noise like a wounded cat. She stood up so fast her chair toppled backward, her voice shrill with disbelief. "This is absurd," she cried, pointing a trembling finger straight at me. "She doesn't belong here." But it was too late. The words were inked, signed, sealed, and there wasn't a thing she could do to stop it. Mrs. Palmer wasn't the only one losing her mind. The whole room seemed to tilt on its axis after the will was read. Cousins, in-laws, old family friends, they were all buzzing like a kicked-up hornet's nest. I sat frozen, hands locked tight in my lap, watching as faces twisted in disbelief, some even in outright disgust. A woman in a velvet dress clutched her pearls so hard they snapped, scattering little beads across the hardwood floor. Nobody bothered to pick them up. "This is a travesty," someone barked from the back, a sharp-nosed man I recognized vaguely from town council meetings. He must have been confused when he signed it. Mrs. Palmer, red-faced and breathing heavy, pushed past the others like a woman possessed. She marched right up to the lawyer's table, her heels clicking like gunshots. "You need to reread that. There must be a mistake," she snapped, stabbing a manicured finger at the documents. The lawyer, bless him, didn't even flinch. He just adjusted his glasses and said, "The will is clear, Mrs. Palmer. Mr. Whitmore updated it 6 months ago. He was fully competent at the time. Witnessed. Notarized." The blood drained from her face, leaving her looking pale and mean. I could feel the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on me, their silent accusations thick in the air. I wasn't supposed to have anything. Not the land. Not the house. Not the money. Not the history. But there it was, written in black and white, and there wasn't a single thing they could say to undo it. Somewhere deep inside, past the fear and the shock, a tiny ember of pride began to glow. I wasn't here by accident. Mr. Whitmore had chosen me, and no amount of their bitterness could change that. Mrs. Palmer wasn't about to let things end quietly. Not her. She rounded on me like a storm, her heels pounding against the floor, her voice slicing through the stunned silence. "You think you're entitled to his legacy?" she spat, her words sharp enough to cut. "You're nothing but a charity case." A stray he felt sorry for. I didn't move. I couldn't. My heart slammed against my ribs, so hard I thought it might crack something inside me. But I kept my face still, my hands tight around my purse. Just like Mama taught me. Don't rise to it, baby girl. Dignity speaks louder than shouting ever will. The lawyer stood up then, his chair scraping back against the polished wood. "Mrs. Palmer," he said, his voice firm, "this behavior will not change the reading of the will. If you cannot remain civil, I'll have to ask you to leave." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but even she must have realized how badly she was losing the room. Murmurs buzzed behind her, people shifting uncomfortably, looking away. She straightened her skirt, shot me a glare so poisonous I swore I could feel it on my skin, and stormed out the door, slamming it hard enough to rattle the chandelier. For a second, nobody moved. Then, one by one, the other heirs started to slink away, some casting me looks of pity, others pure venom. I stayed seated, gripping the chair so tight my knuckles ached, breathing in shallow gulps. I hadn't asked for any of this. I didn't want a war. But standing there in that grand old house, left almost alone, I realized something deep in my bones. They were never going to accept me, and maybe I didn't need them to. When the last angry footsteps faded down the hallway, the lawyer quietly gathered his papers, glanced around the empty room, and motioned for me to stay. My stomach twisted tighter. I wasn't sure if I could take any more surprises. He lowered his voice, soft and almost kind. "Miss Mayfield, there's something else," he said, pulling out a slim envelope with my name scrawled across it in Mr. Whitmore's shaky hand. I stared at it, afraid to touch it, like it might burst into flames if I wasn't careful. My fingers trembled as I reached for it, sliding the flap open with a reverence I couldn't explain. Inside was a letter and a photograph. I unfolded the paper first, blinking hard to clear the sudden blur in my eyes. "Delilah, my dear," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I've moved on, hopefully with a little dignity left intact. You deserve to know why I made the choices I did." I swallowed against the lump forming in my throat. He went on, explaining how he'd watched me grow up, seen how hard Mama worked to give me a life with dignity when the world didn't make it easy, how I reminded him of someone he lost, someone he'd never had the courage to claim. I glanced down at the photo and felt the air punch right out of my lungs. It was Mr. Whitmore, decades younger, standing beside a black woman with my same cheekbones, my same stubborn set to the mouth. My grandmother. Tears blurred the words on the page, but I understood now. This wasn't about charity. This wasn't about pity. It was family, messy, complicated, hidden family, finally coming full circle. Mr. Whitmore hadn't just left me a house. He left me my history. I sat there, clutching that letter like a lifeline, as the weight of everything settled onto my shoulders. It wasn't just land and money, it was blood. It was roots that had been hidden, secret stitched into the fabric of this town, like a patch no one wanted to see. And now that secret had a face, mine. Word spread faster than wildfire. By the time I made it home that afternoon, my phone was blowing up with calls and texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Some were curious, some cruel. The polite mask of Southern hospitality slipped quick when folks felt threatened. It wasn't about the inheritance. Not really. It was about who had inherited it. A black girl from the other side of the tracks. I wasn't supposed to have a seat at their table, let alone own the house that once hosted their charity balls and garden parties. Mrs. Palmer made sure to pour gasoline on the fire. I heard whispers, ugly ones, about how I must have manipulated Mr. Whitmore, taken advantage of his age. The lawyer even warned me that she was consulting other family members about contesting the will. It didn't matter that everything had been done legally. It didn't matter that Mr. Whitmore had made his choice clear. To them, I was still an outsider who had stumbled into something I didn't deserve. I sat on the porch that night, Mama's old quilt wrapped around my shoulders, staring up at that sprawling house and wondering if I was strong enough to fight for it. For him. For me. Somewhere deep down, the answer was already burning. Steady and fierce. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to claim it. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, that letter tucked under my pillow like a shield. I made coffee the way Mama used to, strong enough to wake the dead, and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the dew on the lawn. I knew what I had to do. No more hiding. No more hoping they'd just come around. If Mrs. Palmer and the others wanted to fight, they were going to get one, but on my terms. First thing, I called Mr. Whitmore's lawyer, asking if he could recommend someone tough. He gave me the number of a woman named Ms. Hargrove, a lawyer who made a career out of standing her ground in messy, spiteful cases just like this one. You like her, he said with a chuckle. She doesn't scare easy. Good. Because neither did I, not anymore. Ms. Hargrove didn't waste time. We met that afternoon, and I laid everything out for her. The will, the letter, the rumors, the threats. She listened carefully, her eyes sharp and steady, before leaning back in her chair. They can huff and puff all they want, she said. But legally, they don't have a leg to stand on. You own it, lock, stock, and barrel. And if they try to slander your name in public, well, let's just say we can make that very expensive for them. I felt the tight knot in my chest loosen just a little. For the first time, I wasn't alone in this. As I left her office, I felt the eyes again, people peeking from behind curtains, whispering from porches. Let them. I wasn't going anywhere. This was my home now. And if they thought they could shame me into giving it up, they had another thing coming. The showdown came sooner than I thought. That weekend, the HOA, led, of course, by Mrs. Palmer, called an emergency meeting at the town hall. The notice was pasted on my front gate like a warning, the ink bold and smug. Concerned citizens to discuss rightful ownership of historic Whitmore Estate. I didn't need anyone to tell me they meant me. Ms. Hargrove smiled when I showed her the flyer. Perfect, she said, tapping her pen against her notebook. Let them dig their own grave. Saturday afternoon, I walked into that meeting with my shoulders back and my chin high, the letter from Mr. Whitmore folded neatly in my purse. Ms. Hargrove flanked my side like a bodyguard. The room was packed, folding chairs lined up tight, faces tight with resentment. Mrs. Palmer stood at the front like a queen addressing her court. She launched right into it, voice sugary sweet, masking the venom underneath. We are gathered to discuss the concerning circumstances surrounding the sudden change of ownership of one of our town's most treasured properties, she said, smiling a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Whispers rippled through the room. I could feel their stares, measuring, doubting, dismissing. Mrs. Palmer gestured grandly toward me. We believe that certain undue influences may have been at play. It's only right to ensure the estate remains in proper hands. I stood up then, slow and steady, my heart thundering in my ears. You mean white hands, I said, my voice clear and calm. The room went still, a deep, gut-sick silence. Mrs. Palmer's mouth opened in a shocked little, "Oh," but I didn't let her speak. I pulled out Mr. Whitmore's letter and the deed, held them up for everyone to see. This is my home now, bought and paid for in blood, history, and choice. Deal with it. Mrs. Palmer's face crumpled like a paper bag caught in the rain. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned to look for backup, but none came. The room shifted, like a tide pulling away from her. I caught the flicker of hesitation in neighbors' eyes, the ones who had whispered and gossiped behind my back. They weren't so sure anymore. A few even looked ashamed. Ms. Hargrove stepped forward then, her voice slicing through the heavy silence. Any attempt to interfere with Miss Mayfield's legal ownership will be met with swift legal action, she said, her words sharp and deliberate. I suggest you all think very carefully before you open your mouths again. Mrs. Palmer let out a strangled sound, half scoff, half whimper, and grabbed her handbag with trembling hands. She stormed out, her loyal few scrambling after her like ducklings, but most stayed seated, staring at me with something new in their faces. Not exactly welcome, not exactly warmth, but maybe respect. I stood there for a moment longer, breathing in the thick, Humid air that room, letting it settle deep in my bones. I wasn't going to apologize for existing. I wasn't going to beg for a place that was already mine. As I turned to leave, the first crack in the wall came. A woman from the back, one quieter ones, said softly, "Welcome home, Miss Mayfield." It wasn't much, but it was a start. That evening, I sat on the front porch of the Whitmore house, the old floorboards creaking under my rocking chair, watching the sun dip low behind the trees. The battle had cost me something, a kind of innocence, maybe, but it had given me something greater, too. A place, a voice, a future that belonged, without apology, to me. The house felt different now, not haunted by the past, not weighed down by other people's expectations. It breathed with me, settled around me like an old quilt stitched from stories nobody could erase. That first night back, I lit every lamp in the front parlor, pulled open the heavy curtains, and let the light pour out onto the lawn like a declaration. I'm here. I'm staying. For days after the meeting, neighbors came by, cautiously at first. Some brought casseroles, still hot under tin foil. Some came empty-handed, but with sheepish smiles and nervous small talk. I took each visit for what it was. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, but maybe a first step towards something real. Not everyone showed up. Mrs. Palmer's house stayed dark. Curtains pulled tight, like she could block out the world she didn't like. I didn't lose a minute of sleep over it. Life moved on. I planted new flowers out front, bold, defiant colors that made the house look alive again. I found Mr. Whitmore's old books tucked away in the study, notes scribbled in the margins like quiet conversations left behind just for me. I read them by the window at night, feeling him close by. And one Saturday, I hosted a picnic on the front lawn, just a small one. A few neighbors, some of Mama's friends from the old side of town, kids chasing each other through the grass. Laughter rang out across the property, rolling through the trees and filling up all the spaces that had once been so still. I caught myself smiling, without even thinking about it. This house, this land, this life, it was all mine now, built from struggle, blessed by stubbornness, and made whole by the simple, undeniable truth. I belonged here, and I always had.